All right, guys. So we are officially less than a week out from the election, and it's a jump ball, anybody's game. Who knows what's going to happen? It is as close as you could possibly imagine. And so it looks like people are trying to get some last second points up on the board here. In this case, we have conservatives absolutely melting down hysterically over this Joseph Robinette Biden clip here that I'm about to play for you guys. So the context of this is he's responding to that Madison Square Garden Trump rally that I covered a couple of days ago, where you had the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe from Kill Tony, and he made a joke about how Puerto Rico is a floating island of garbage. So Biden is speaking here to a Latino voting group, and this is what he had to say.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Okay, so essentially there are two different ways that you can interpret this. Number one, you can interpret this as Joe Biden saying that anybody who votes for Trump is garbage, right? And you could have a whole conversation about whether or not that's true or whether it's true to some extent. And then the other way that you could interpret it, which is the way that Joe Biden explained it afterwards, that I'll show you the tweet of here in a second, is that he meant the people at Trump's rally, in other words, his supporters like Tony Hinchcliffe, who were calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, that they're the real garbage people, right? Not the Puerto Ricans, okay? That's the way that I think is what Biden actually meant to say in this clip. But you also have to keep in mind, we are talking about somebody who is the president of the United States, right? Who was running for re-election, but was too senile to be able to continue in that race for re-election. So he's a little bit lost in the sauce, basically anytime that he gives a public speech or a public appearance like this. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, he might not be fully cognitively aware of exactly what the words are that are coming out of his mouth. Now, this is how his team cleaned it up afterwards. Okay, he says, earlier today, I referred to the hateful rhetoric about Puerto Rico spewed by Trump supporters at Madison Square Garden rally as garbage, which is the only word I can think of to describe it. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable. That's all I meant to say. The comments at that rally don't reflect who we are as a nation. So you guys tell me how you interpret what Joe Biden said. Are you guys buying this explanation? To me, it kind of makes sense. I think in his head, he was thinking about the comments made by Tony about how Puerto Rico is a floating island of garbage. And so he was retorting to the people who would say that kind of a thing. If you know anything about Joe Biden and how he ran his 2020 Democratic primary campaign and how he acted as president, the idea that Joe Biden is some sort of like a radical lefty who thinks that anybody to the right of him is garbage is just kind of ridiculous at face value. I mean, this is the same guy who would cozy up to any Republican if it meant that he would be able to work with them on some sort of a bipartisan piece of legislation, even if it's an incredibly right-wing piece of legislation. And this is something that we saw, recently, even addressing the issue of immigration directly. I mean, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both have a pretty right-wing immigration policy right now. So, I mean, again, the idea that this is like, oh, Joe Biden is having his basket of deplorables moment, harkening back to Hillary Clinton from 2016. To me, I don't know. I'm not fully buying that kind of thing. And also, it's the difference there is that when Hillary Clinton made her basket of deplorables, statement, she was the candidate. Joe Biden is not the candidate. Kamala Harris is the candidate. And so, to me, I don't think that this is going to hit as hard as some conservatives like here, Benny Johnson. I don't think it's going to hit as hard as that did back in 2016. Now, if Trump gets his way, it absolutely will. So here's what Trump had to say. He says, and this is not a joke, guys, this is from his actual Twitter account. Donald J. Trump said, while I am running a campaign of positive solutions to save America, Kamala Harris is running a campaign of hate. She spent all week comparing her political opponents to the most evil mass murderers in history. He's referring to Hitler there. The comparison to Hitler originated with some of the former members of your cabinet or former generals that worked under you. Okay, those are the people who are comparing you to Adolf Hitler. In fact, they didn't even compare you to Adolf Hitler. They said, number one, that you are a fascist to the bone, and number two, that you, Donald Trump, behind the scenes, were saying how you wanted to have generals who were more like Hitler's generals. So That's not even them necessarily saying you are Hitler 2.0. That's them saying that you yourself said that you wanted Hitler's generals. Okay, but he continues. He says, now, on top of everything, Joe Biden calls our supporters garbage. You can't lead America if you don't love the American people. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have shown that they are unfit to be president of the United States. Okay, listen, guys. First off, this first sentence, I almost had a stroke reading this sentence. Trump is running a campaign of positive solutions? Huh? What? The same Trump? The same Trump who had this rally recently, just a couple of days ago, where again, they were calling Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. They said these Latinos, they love making babies. There was a joke made about how a black guy in the audience liked to carve watermelons instead of pumpkins for Halloween. Kamala Harris was compared to the Antichrist. Kamala Harris said, it was said that she had pimp handlers. This rally, was it the same Donald Trump that we're talking about here, who himself said that the United States is a garbage can for the rest of the world? Now you're getting mad about garbage being used as a sort of word to describe people who would support you. But you said that the U.S. is a garbage can for the rest of the world. And keep in mind, what he was talking about here is migrants moving to the United States. He has this idea that the bottom of the barrel, the worst people from any given country on the face of the earth are being sent here to the United States, that we are a garbage can for the rest of the world. Other verbiage that he's used to describe migrants would include that they're poisoning the blood of the country. If you don't want to be called a fascist, if you don't want to be compared to Hitler, stop using fascist rhetoric. Maybe that's like step one. I don't know, buddy. We also had this. Trump suggests using the military against the enemy from within, and then when asked to clarify what he meant by the enemy from within, he repeatedly brought up Democrats. So the same guy is now saying he's running a positive campaign, a campaign of positivity, while Kamala is running a campaign of hate. Donald Trump, of all people, saying this. The Muslim ban guy, that Donald Trump. You're literally saying you want to deploy the military against your political opponents, and then you're saying that the Kamala Harris campaign is a campaign of hate. Now, I'm not a Kamala supporter. I'm not a fan of the Democratic Party, especially not the Democratic Party establishment. There are a handful of Democrats that I think are doing a decent job. But the idea that Kamala Harris's campaign is a campaign of hate and yours is the campaign of love and positivity? Who believes this? Now, we also have J.D. Vance here. He said this: a mother mourning her son who died of a fentanyl overdose is not garbage. A truck driver who can't afford rising diesel prices is not garbage, and a father who wants to afford groceries is not garbage. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden ought to be ashamed of themselves. The same J.D. Vance, who himself, by the way, referring back to Trump's, complaining about comparisons to the worst monsters in human history, like Adolf Hitler, the same J.D. Vance who himself, previously years ago, compared Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler. He said, Trump is America's Hitler. Now that same J.D. Vance says Kamala Harris and Joe Biden ought to be ashamed of themselves. Ashamed of themselves. This is the same J.D. Vance, by the way, who pledged that if he was in the position to back in 2020, he would have helped Trump to overturn the election. That's why Trump picked him, by the way. So the same J.D. Vance who basically changed some of the most fundamental aspects of his ideology, of his policy positions, so that he could suck up to Trump to be put in this position of power in the first place. That same J.D. Vance is now turning around and, while supporting Donald Trump, saying that, no, it's the other side that has inflammatory rhetoric. It's the other side that is taking this a little bit too far. Again, who buys into this shit? Now, in terms of the specifics here, a mother mourning her son who died of a fentanyl overdose is not garbage. A truck driver who can't afford rising diesel prices. So, these are all fair things to point out here, right? People are dying of fentanyl overdoses. People are struggling to afford groceries and gas prices, etc. But, what exactly was Trump's plan to address these things? Fentanyl overdoses? What does he want to bomb Mexico? To go after the drug cartels? Is that what it is? Guys, on every single one of these main issues that guys like J.D. Vance or guys like Donald Trump bring up, that are real issues, by the way. But when you get down to what are the solutions to this, they completely ignore some of the basic facts here. First off, how is fentanyl coming into the country? In the words of somebody like Donald Trump, it's coming over because undocumented migrants are coming to the U.S. across the border. A vast majority of the illicit drugs that come into this country are being brought in by American citizens through legal ports of entry. You know, if you want to talk about rising gas prices, how about we talk about policies like a windfall profits tax that Bernie Sanders proposed years ago when fossil fuel companies during the pandemic decided to artificially raise gas prices to make a quick buck off the American people? Do you want to have a conversation about that? Or is your solution to addressing diesel prices just to ratchet up the fossil fuel extraction that is destroying the planet? That's the strategy, beyond the levels at which Kamala and Joe Biden have already increased it, which is massively, by the way. I mean, grocery prices. Are you willing to take on the corporations who are price gouging the American people on groceries? What exactly is the plan here? These are all real issues. But I guess my point is, they don't have real solutions. They just don't. Now, we also move on here because we have Tom Cotton chiming in as well. He says, Kamala Harris was deeply outraged by a comedian's joke. If she has any decency or integrity, she will condemn her partner Joe Biden's despicable statement calling half the country garbage. Hassan points out here that this asshole, Tom Cotton, literally advocated to kill BLM and pro-Palestine protesters. He is garbage. So are his supporters. Now, again, it's a different conversation to have beyond just conversations about how Trump or Tom Cotton or whoever the case may be are garbage people. By the way, I also think Joe Biden is garbage. I also think to a large extent Kamala Harris is garbage. But like, it's a different conversation to talk about people who support these politicians. But it's difficult, man, because I think if you listen to a guy who talks about migrants poisoning the blood of the country, a guy who tried to overturn the last election to keep himself in power even though he knew he lost. When you're talking about a guy who tried to implement a Muslim ban, a ban of an entire religion from coming into the country, when you're talking about a guy who uses the word Palestinian as a slur in order to justify his genocidal position, if you look at Trump's history, both in office and as a public figure, what he says, what he does, and you support him, does that make you garbage? I don't know. I mean, at this point, that's kind of a tough call. It depends on who the person is. If this was 2016, we'd be talking about something completely different because we didn't know what Trump was bringing to the table, right? He ran on, we're going to drain the swamp. We're going to do this and that. We now know who Trump is. This is a different world right now. If you listen to Trump, and you believe in what his stated agenda is, what his stated ideological framework is, does that make you a garbage person? I don't know. Is it completely out of pocket? Is it unfair to say something like that? I don't know. Ask conservatives. Ask conservatives who would say easily, without blinking an eye, that a leftist like me, who is a socialist, is beyond garbage. They would use much more aggressive words to describe somebody with my belief system, right? So I don't know. You guys tell me how you feel about this. Is this like unconscionable rhetoric here that's being used? Now, we also have Charlie Kirk chiming in here, deciding to escalate this to a point that, is difficult to wrap your mind around. Here we have Charlie Kirk saying, Joe Biden is using dehumanizing language towards 80 million Americans, calling Trump supporters garbage. This is how the worst atrocities of the 20th century began and will begin again in 2024. They think you are garbage, therefore worthy of elimination. So now we've gone from, okay, Joe Biden is kind of being an asshole for saying that Trump supporters are garbage, right? To now we're saying, no. Joe Biden not only thinks that you are garbage, but he wants to do a genocide of conservatives here. Joe Biden is saying that conservatives are worthy of elimination. This is how the worst atrocities of the 20th century will be duplicated in 2024. If you vote for Kamala, you're voting for your own extermination by the Democratic Party, maybe by weather machines. I don't know what their chosen method will be. What are we doing here, guys? What are we doing here? You have like an offhand comment from Joe Biden as he's doing like a webcam seminar with a Latino voting group, and that has somehow turned into Joe Biden wants to genocide conservatives. Who are the snowflakes in this equation? right? Because guys like Charlie Kirk, they love to talk about how liberals are all snowflakes and they overreact to everything that Trump says and take it way too far. You're taking Joe Biden, who by his own explanation, if you buy it, was saying that people who call Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage are actually they themselves garbage. And you're taking that and interpreting it as he wants to eliminate anybody who votes for Trump through violence. I mean, come on, man. Come on. Now, I guess I'll finish it off there. I'm curious to get y'all's opinions on this. Is this Hillary Clinton, basket of deplorables 2.0, or is this just a complete overreaction and a freak out over a nothing burger here as sort of like a Hail Mary or a full court shot at the last minute?
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying